I created my second business, and this is not an exaggeration, can you believe, by candlelight in the 3-day week. Labour and Conservative governments had been in office, but the trades unions were actually in power. May I say, what a great pleasure it is to be here tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, as Tom said, Ralph was a formative influence on me. I was a businessman, he was a thinker, but somehow we found a great deal in common, and his ideas always sent me into delights. And I can, looking around the room, see one or two other people here who were inspired by his example, not least the two distinguished founders of the Adam Smith Institute. Well, my first encounter with Ralph and the Institute of Economic Affairs was through reading one of their monographs on labour markets. At that time, it was part of my business. Several more, I think I'm right in saying they were called monographs. Several more monographs came to my attention, which seemed to me to talk a very great deal of sense, particularly about the economy and about businesses, and it had real resonance. And from my limited, even business experience then, Ralph's market solutions were vivid and appealing. It was the 1970s. I was 25 years old, and I'd established my first business and was employing about 500 people. If, like me, you think things are bad now, I can only say to you there are many parallels with that period before. Labour and Conservative governments had been in office, but the trades unions were actually in power. There were disgraceful forms of appeasement, demeaning to individual freedoms, including compulsory trade union membership by means of the closed shop. Anybody remember that? I had various run-ins with the local government bureaucracy involving planning, licensing, and regulation, and all gave me the distinct impression that neither local authorities nor central government had much sympathy for small businesses. The growth of my business, indeed, was dictated by a state undertaking, a state monopoly, namely the telephone company, which later became BT. There were bizarre central government impositions on business. Can you believe selective employment tax was one of the great transformative ideas of the Wilson government? The idea was, of course, to shift people from service employment into manufacturing. It would be about equivalent, I think, to try to stop the tide of the Thames coming up here with plywood. So these bizarre measures coming out of government, I thought such things can't surely happen. But they did. The investment climate was grim. Investment income, in fact, from businesses attracted a personal tax surcharge of 15%, taking the total to 83% of your income. Exchange controls restricted investment outside the UK and were subject to the approval of the Bank of England. Indeed, you had to pay the dollar premium if you wanted to invest in the growing American economy. There was little or no venture capital available for small businesses like mine. It was fine if you wanted the City of London to raise a few £1 million or even £1 million. It was easy. Small businesses, it just didn't exist. And all this gave me the dawning consciousness that somehow government was not on the side of those like me trying to create a business. Indeed, I created my second business, and this is not an exaggeration, can you believe, by candlelight in the 3-day week. So, in the wider context, there was a pessimism which was rife among the political class, at least on the right of politics. Keynesianism prevailed, abetted by its handmaiden state control, and at least in private, and there are those in the room who will remember, many prominent conservatives thought that the best we could hope for was the orderly management of the decline in the UK economy. And amid this gloom, I remembered the IEA monographs and the market solutions with their refreshing, innovative approach. And I think as it was said by one of them at the time, thinking the unthinkable. And so to cheer myself up, I decided to seek out these radicals that were producing this stuff. And to my surprise and delight, I found Ralph Harris and Arthur Selden and a small group of followers, not 3 minutes from here, huddled together in their office, full of optimism, common sense, and brimming with ideas for an alternative way. It was really quite an uplifting experience for a young businessman like me, hot off the train from Croydon, to find these thinkers, these scholars. And they talked and wrote really heady stuff, which I found it easy to identify with. I listened actually in awe to Ralph and Arthur, and they showed me why it was the government of this country had been so chronically mismanaged, and the scales fell from my eyes. The conservative pessimists, of course, they were not willing to listen to the Institute of Economic Affairs or Ralph or anyone else. They still believed in their wages policy and much else. But they'd found actually a new enthusiasm which swept a lot of us up. The solution, of course, was Europe. And indeed, I was brought up, as I'm sure many of you here were, on the notion that Britain had been good enough to be able to govern a substantial part of the world. These guys seemed to think that we weren't even up to governing ourselves. So it was a funny, depressing time. And despite the best efforts of the IEA, it took the failure of the Heath government under the pressure of a trade union to force the realization that there was an alternative way. And there was an alternative way, well spelled out by Ralph, and by now more than 300 followers, which he had gathered with others round the IEA. But come the time, come the lady. Margaret Thatcher had all the right instincts, but her early days were marked by a certain tentative caution. She knew that she represented the hard-working classes, the aspirational classes, those who'd created Britain's wealth and global trade, the people who believed in Britain and made it happen. But the weight of establishment opinion at the time was against her. And this, of course, was the magic of Ralph and his followers. These dangerous radicals had created something crucially important. They and others, several of them IEA disciples, persuaded her that her economic views were a new approach, increasingly widely respected. Friedman, Hayek, there was a cohort of free market, free enterprise economists who also espoused monetarism. With her help, they actually won a complete intellectual triumph. A triumph, the effects of which were quickly felt all around the world. Who believes in income policies today? Not even that great economist, Rachel Reeves. Not a one. And so, to this evening's hero. As Tom said, this is the 100th anniversary of Ralph's birth. In his heaven, I suspect that he will have persuaded the Almighty to ensure that the Heavenly Souls Trades Union is not working a closed shop. But whatever about his eternal life, we should all be grateful to him for his earthly life. He was an outstanding thinker, a passionate and ceaseless servant of the public interest. An inspiration to lovers of freedom, and a friend to millions of people round the world who were lifted out of poverty as a result of his ideas. That I could call Ralph a friend gives me no greater pleasure. But in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, let me say, like many, I take his memory as a divine inspiration, both now and forever.